When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
All right, hello YouTube. Welcome back to the Grease Comedy channel. Today's video, we're going to be discussing a really interesting theory. It's not one I actually believe in, but I find it extremely interesting because it really paints this picture of kind of what the entire Targaryen dynasty was inflicted with, of kind of this idea of who is going to come after you. And so the video topic today is going to be, was Aegon actually unable to have children? And so there's a lot of reasons that this theory is brought up. It has a lot of valid reasons. I'm going to talk about some of the criticisms, as I am someone that maybe doesn't believe this theory that much. I think it is, like I talked about, I think it is very interesting to study. But the whole idea is going to come from this idea that, again, Aegon is born 27 years before the conquest. So again, he was a young man by the time the conquest started. He wasn't like Rob's age or anything. Like, he was a man grown at this time. But yet, he didn't have any heirs until 7 AC, when Aenys is born, when Aegon himself is 34 years old. Visenya did not give birth to Maegor until 12 AC. Again, Aegon was going towards his 40s at this point. Now, this isn't unheard of. We know of people having children at older ages. Even Visenya at the time, I believe, was like 41. She was older than Aegon, so again, it is kind of wild. Pregnant with Maegor this older in life. But the whole idea here is, okay, were these actually Aegon's children? And we'll get into that in this video. But before we get into the video, if you guys like to learn more about A Song of Ice and Fire, Winds of Winter, all that nice stuff, or House of the Dragon as well, I'll be covering the show when it kicks back off again. Please subscribe and like if you would like more of that content. And let's get into the video. So let's look at the main idea here. The main idea here is, how did Aegon go almost 15, 20 years while being married to Visenya and Rhaenys, having two wives, again, two chances, and not having any children until much later in life? And that's a valid criticism. Was it that Aegon just was not worried about sleeping with his queens, about having children? Was it that he just got unlucky? Was that kind of what ended up happening? Because it's just very odd, given the circumstances that Aegon and Rhaenys were said to have a very good relationship. And so you would think that they would be sleeping together or trying to have a child, but maybe you could bring up the point that, okay, maybe Aegon did not want children around before the conquest or during the conquest because it's going to be a dangerous time. You don't want to have to be looking over a child while you're trying to take over, or you're trying to unite this entire continent. That's plausible, but I do find it hard to believe. Now, you can make more excuses with Aegon and Visenya because the two did not really have like that relationship, right? Theirs is more of a dutiful relationship. It's how it's described in Fire and Blood. It reminds me a lot of like Stannis and Selyse, where they do their duty, but they're not like romantically involved, I think, that greatly. I think for them, it is more like a actual family type relationship, as disgusting as that is to say with the incest going on, but that's how I've always read them. And so when we come to this point of the story where it's like, okay, Aegon has now taken the throne and he still doesn't have any kids. It still takes another 7 years after Aegon is on the throne for Aenys to be born. So did Rhaenys and Visenya and Aegon get desperate? Did they realize he wasn't having kids? And did Aegon allow Rhaenys to go with maybe one of these other people that would have been lusting after her? Did Aegon allow Visenya to go with someone else and to make a child just so they could keep the line going? That's interesting because it is something that I think Aegon would have done if he believed he couldn't have children. It's something I could see Visenya doing as well. But I think when you look at the counter argument, so again, this is going to be the introductory of the theory. I don't really think there's a lot of evidence supporting it that we know of. Evidence that you can concretely look at and say, yes, this is evidence for why. Maybe another thing you could point to is that Aenys and Maegor were not really like Aegon at all. I mean, Aegon is someone that was firm and just, but also could be very kind. He was very smart when it came to politically unifying the entire country, whereas Maegor and Aenys really weren't that. But the way I look at that, and this is going to start kind of the counter arguments to this, is that one, I think Maegor and Aenys are used to really represent their mothers a lot more than they are representing their father. Where Maegor is quite literally an interpretation of Visenya, but in male form. Maegor is very similar to Visenya. Visenya is one of Maegor's closest allies and advisors. When Visenya dies, it hurts Maegor a lot. And we don't really see this when Aegon dies. We know very little of Aegon and Maegor's relationship, which is another reason that I think the two aren't alike, is because I don't think Aegon was really a present factor in Maegor's life. We don't really see any of that. Now, Aenys, I'm not sure about Aenys, because Aenys was the person that was going to become king, but even in Aenys, we see a lot of, I think, more of Rhaenys in him than we do Aegon. And so we look at the two sides of the coin, where you have Aenys is too weak and Maegor is too overbearing. And I think it's an interesting contrast, because we see how Aegon was someone that always balanced those things really well. He could be someone that could assert his dominance, could flex the power of the Targaryens like we see at Harrenhal, but he also could be someone that was very forgiving, and he could be someone that knew how to make allies. And that is something that we see constantly, whether that be with the Tullys or the Tyrells. He was someone that was able to manage that really well and not do conflict when it wasn't needed. That was something that Aenys and Maegor struggled to do. And so I have looked at this theory, and I think it's an interesting theory, and I think it's a valid theory. It has a lot of skepticism to it, but I think it undermines really what was going on. And I do think there is the possibility, like I mentioned earlier on in this video, that Aegon was not really as concerned about having heirs early on, right? When he was busy planning his invasion of Westeros, planning how he was going to do all these things, and even thinking about, like, having a baby around or a young child around during the conquest was just something that wasn't needed. Because think about how vital Visenya and Rhaenys were. What happens if they get pregnant right during the conquest? How does that impact their ability to be one of the leading generals or leading people in Aegon's circle at this time? The dragons are the main reason they win, right? Rhaenys and the Stormlands is the biggest reason they're able to take down Argilac. Visenya having a dragon in Vhagar is the main reason, and her diplomacy is one of the biggest reasons she's able to help take the Vale, or the reason she's able to take Crackclaw Point. So I think it's this understanding that even that Aegon knew he shouldn't really have children around this point. And so then it comes to the idea, well, okay, why is there this then 7-year gap? And maybe Aegon could have viewed this as, okay, I still don't want children yet because we're going to be doing the conquest of Dorne. And maybe Aegon just didn't think he was going to die. That after he took most of Westeros and turned to Dorne, there was no threat to them, right? They'd taken over Westeros, far bigger numbers than what the Dornish were going to be able to provide against them. And that kind of backfired on him a little bit. Now, we do know that, again, Aenys is born before Rhaenys dies, but still, it is a wonder to think that Aegon doesn't start having children until his mid-30s, late 30s. It's a little peculiar. It's something that we see the Targaryens struggle with a lot throughout history. Maegor is someone that struggles with having children. Maybe that's something he gets from his father, right? We didn't even consider that angle, that Maegor, maybe the reason he struggles with children outside of a lot of these more cruel, or I guess unworthy Targaryens struggling with childbirth or struggling to have children, maybe that's one of the reasons that when you look at the main Targaryen, Aegon Targaryen, he is someone that struggled with having children, and that's something he passed down all the way down the Targaryen line, and something we could even see affecting someone like Daenerys in the future, alongside of what ends up happening with kind of the killing of her baby and that blood sacrifice. So let me know what you guys think about Aegon being infertile. I personally don't take a lot of stock in it. I think it's a very fascinating idea. I really like talking about the idea. I just don't think it is that realistic for me. But thank you guys all for watching, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.